implies something pretty phenomenal, which is, again, part of the intention behind tomorrow night's numerology course, which is the idea that we can kind of decode the design of creation by looking at the blueprint. So just to explain this, when our sages tell us that God looked into Torah and created the world, it's said in the context of like a builder or an architect, or like a builder that looks at the architectural draft and then proceeds to create or build. Simple example. Imagine you're building a home. When I say building a home, I mean very literally. You're building a home. Not buying a home, not building a home from scratch. You have a piece of land and now you're building a home. What's the first thing you're going to do? Is you're going to get an architect, right? You're going to draw some plans because you have to know which wall goes where, how the walls look, how the house looks, the outside, the inside. You have to know what this is looking like. And you probably want to hire a professional that knows how to design a home in a way that works both on every level, both structurally, on a pragmatic level, but also in a way that is good for you, that works with your energy. And of course, you'll be involved in the process, but you'll need a professional, most likely. Unless you're the professional, in that case, you also have a professional because you're the professional. But the bottom line is, there has to be a design. You don't build a house by just showing up to the site and saying, all right, let's start, and then you just throw stuff up. That's not going to be a sustainable model to building a home. Building a home, building a house requires a plan. In a very similar way, our sages tell us that before God created the world, God had a plan. What's the plan? In other words, the plan is like a vision for what the world should look like. And what is that vision? That vision is Torah. That's why Torah is called the blueprint of creation. Kabbalah calls Torah the blueprint of creation. So, if you want to understand the world, here's the simple implication of this. Like, what does that mean for you and I? Something absolutely mind-blowing. And that is, if you want to understand something in the world, in the universe, where do you look? At the blueprint. Imagine you're trying to understand a house. Imagine you're buying a property, right? And you want to know the ins and outs of the property. So you can walk it, you can go through it, but then you want to look at the blueprints to see, the whole picture. Yeah? What are the dimensions? How does it look? How does it work? How does it flow together? So you look at the blueprint to get a better picture of what's going on the ground, inside that space. So if we want to have a better understanding of what's going on around us, the Kabbalists say, what's the place? Where do we look? We turn to, of course, Torah, because in Torah there is we have all of the answers to all of the questions of life, and all of the explanations as to the nuances of why things are the way they are, for better or for worse. When I say for worse, I mean, of course, from our perception. But we get a better understanding of even the stuff that we don't understand or resist on a level of like, this is not good, this is not pleasant. Even that starts to make sense once we look into the blueprint that is Torah. So what's the point? I want to establish a simple idea. Not an easy idea, but a very straightforward idea. And that is that there is design all around us. The world is created by design, by the master designer, by the master architect. This is something that our great patriarch Abraham, Avraham, discovered. He grew up in a world that was filled with pagan ideas and ideals. The world was a pagan world. Everyone around him was serving idols. And what did they worship specifically? They worshipped the sun and the moon and the stars. They worshipped the heavenly bodies, the things that they felt were influencers. Today that's a big word. Today, to be an influencer is a big deal, right? Instagram influencers, etc. So TikTok influencers, although that's... Anyway, the point is like this, that the people of Abraham's generation, they worshipped, they served that which they felt was influencing their lives. But the influencers that they had back in those times, as we know from well documented, based on the ancient texts, based on just a look at history of that time, the forces that they believed in were absolutely chaotic. They were absolutely chaotic. It was chaos. It was this God fighting with that God and this planet, trying to undermine that planet, and that force of nature trying to destroy the other force. It was chaotic. And then you had heavenly bodies, planets or whatever, forces that were trying to undermine human beings. This was their belief system, this mythical, paganistic belief system. It was absolute chaos and running amok. There is no design, there is no order, there is just straight up a grab for power and infighting, just complete chaos. This is a topic, by the way, that we explored last fall, I believe, when we did the course. No, I'm sorry, last winter. Okay, last winter, a few months ago. Back in January, February, right? We explored this idea in the course, Judaism's Gifts to the
BC.
World. Sorry?
BC.
Yeah, January BC, before Corona. Yeah, exactly, or before COVID, depending on your the way you like to phrase it. Exactly, BC. The last JLI, the last 6-week, JLI course that we did in person was the course called Judaism's Gifts to the World, and one of the sessions was all about monotheism. And we asked the question, so what's the big deal about monotheism? Who cares, right? So the ancient people believed in 100 gods, and Abraham came along and said, one. Well, why is that better? Is this golf? Right? When you play golf, you want a lower score. You want a lower number. Right? When you play golf, you don't want to shoot like an 80, 90. You want like a 60, 70 if you're really good, right? You want a low score. So what is this? It was golf? Like golf of gods? Or gods of golf? Where everyone else was shooting a high score and Abraham's like, nope, hole in one. Just the one. That's it. Mind blown. What is that? And that's monotheism, and that's Judaism, and that's the revolution of Abraham. What's so revolutionary? So the way we understand it is it's not just a numbers game. It's the difference between chaos and order. In other words, it's the difference between chaos and the key word for today's session, which is design. It's the difference between no design versus absolute design. The ancient people, ancient civilizations, this one I'm calling BA, before Abraham, not BC, before Abraham, BA. That's probably a better signifier anyway when we look at history. The world BA believed that this was absolute chaos. There was no one force in charge. There were different forces warring, fighting, undermining, undercutting, chaos, a jungle. Abraham came along and said, you got it wrong. You got it wrong. There's one master designer. And if it looks like a jungle here on earth, that's us. That's us acting like jungle creatures as opposed to civilized beings. So what's the point? The point is there is design. If we don't see the design, that just means one thing. We're messing it up. God gave us a garden and we're allowing weeds to grow. So, like God told Adam and Eve, I'm putting you in the garden, tend the garden, guard the garden, take care of it. That means two things. They were given two tasks in the Garden of Eden. I'm going to use the Hebrew words, la'avda u'lishamra, to work it and to protect it. And that means two things. Number one, if you have a garden, one thing that you want to do is plant nice things inside it, right? You have a nice garden, you want to add more beautiful things, add more nice design to it. That's la'avda, to work it, to continue to add to it. And the second term, l'shamra, means to protect it against the negative influences, which would mean like weeds or animals that might come, animals or other creatures that might come to destroy the garden. So there's 2 steps to gardening. Mind you, this is coming from someone who's not the most prolific gardener. I'm just saying, but I'm explaining this Kabbalistically, right? So anyway, Kabbalistically, what it means is like this. There's 2 steps. One is to put nice stuff in and to keep the not nice stuff out. Very simple. And by the way, this is our mission in life, to do nice things and to make sure not nice things don't happen. Very simple when you boil it down, right? Life is very simple when you get to the core of it. The mission didn't change since Adam and Eve. And by the way, the words that I'm quoting, la'avdo l'shamra, goes back to the 1st or 2nd chapter of Genesis. When it talks about God placing Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, it says that he placed them there, la'avdo l'shamra, to work it and to guard it. The setting might change. Maybe we're not in ancient Mesopotamia or whatever it is where the Garden of Eden was. Maybe we are where we are, right? The bottom line is, the task is still the same. This is what Abraham reintroduced because the world knew that at a certain time. Adam and Eve knew that, although they decided to eat from the forbidden fruit anyway, but they knew that there was a design, there was a purpose. They also knew that they were about to violate it, and they did, but they knew the truth. The world, though, slowly forgot the truth until Abraham came along. And Abraham came along, and it wasn't about 1 versus 100 gods. It was about, is there a design or is there no design? Is there purpose, vision, an architect, a design, a plan, a model, a system, a purpose, a vision, or, I may have said the same words twice, don't worry about it, or is there just abject chaos, do whatever you want? Knock down the other because they'll knock down you, right? Dog eat dog world. That was the view of the ancients. By the way, I say ancients just to make ourselves feel a little bit better because sometimes we have the same perspective. Not we, right? But people today also have the same perspective. That the world is a jungle and you better get the other person before they get you. That's not an Abrahamic, monotheistic, Jewish perspective. Why? It all goes back to design. Abraham believed and Abraham taught. And we are the legacy of Abraham. And what was this fundamental teaching? What was monotheism? Monotheism is essentially there's one architect, there's one designer that has a plan and created the world per that plan and entrusted us to take care of it. Imagine you build a beautiful home. Built a gorgeous, a really beautiful home. And you give it to your teenager. And you tell your teenager, this is yours, right? This is yours. A beautiful structure, beautiful home. This is yours now. Enjoy. What would be the context? I don't know. I mean, imagine a context. Imagine, let's say, you're sending your child away to college somewhere, right? Again, BC, and they're going out of town, and dorms. Where are they going to stay? So you say, you know what? I'm going to build a house over there in that city. Build a house, and then they can live in that house. Maybe not a teenager. Yeah, I guess 18, college, 18, 19. The house is built with intent, right? And the young adult, right, he or she is in charge, is entrusted with living it and taking care of it. What happens next? That's where free choice comes in. Party. I see Dr. Max, I see you mouthing party. Probably, yes, I would imagine that would be the case. But what I'm trying to say is that the intentionality comes from the architect with the capital A and the designer with a capital D, referring to God. That's where the design comes in. What happens next? We're the teenager, right? We're the one. Now God says, I built this. It's beautiful. There's a purpose. There's a plan. I'm even giving you the plan. I'm even giving you the blueprint, so you can see what the purpose is. You can decode what this is all about. Here you go. Enjoy. And now it's up to us. But that's what this is what Abraham taught. Abraham taught the world we all have a responsibility. We are all custodians of a beautiful palace, a beautiful mansion that God created that is this world. In fact, and by the way, everything that I'm telling you now is well sourced, not only in Kabbalah, but also classic. When I say classic, I mean not necessarily mystical Jewish teachings. In fact, what I'm telling you right now is what the Midrash says, that Abraham proclaimed to the world, and I'm quoting verbatim in Hebrew, Yesh balabayis lebira zu. There is a balabayis. You know what a balabayis is? A balhabayit means there's an owner of the house. It's a hard word to translate into English. There's someone in charge. Reva, say hi. There's someone in charge of this palace, of this mansion. He uses the word mansion. Abraham taught the world, there's someone in charge, which means not that God's going to fix up the mess. No. God wants us to fix up. God wants us not to make a mess, to make it look even nicer than we got it, and to do the right maintenance on it, to maybe add some extra tweaks to the mansion that he built, right? That's what God wants. But what Abraham was telling the world is, don't think that you and I are here due to some cosmic accident. They didn't have the language, the scientific language that we have today. Big Bang and evolution. And this is not about religion, Torah versus science right now. But one of the challenges that we have when we just look at things through a scientific lens, and this is not questioning the validity of science, this is just explaining or discussing what are the ramifications. So therefore what? So if all of this is the result of a cosmic accident, so then what does that mean for us? That means that we might not have been here. Do we have to be here? No. Are we necessary? No. Is there purpose? Why would there be purpose if this was an accident? How can you have purpose from an accident? Those are the direct implications of these ideas. And these ideas were also around in ancient times. They had different words. Instead of the scientific terms, they had gods, paganism, whatever they called it then. But the point, the upshot, or what follows is the same. The conclusion is the same. The conclusion, the concept is, this is random, this is chaotic, and the conclusion is, therefore, do whatever you want. Seek survival. Try to knock the other one down. Right? That's the upshot. The upshot is, do whatever you can to make yourself, the king of the jungle, and to knock the other one down. Remember as kids we used to play, used to stand on a rock or something, and whoever could get up there the first and knock the other one down, whatever. Maybe you didn't play that. Maybe you did. Who knows? But that's how the ancients looked at the world, and that's a direct result of a philosophy. You see, behavior is driven by philosophy, whether we're aware of it or whether we're not aware of it. Things don't just pop up in a vacuum. Things pop up as a result of a certain way of thinking, a certain way of believing. The ancients believed that there's no one in charge, that there's no purpose. Therefore, they acted without purpose, without meaning, without intentionality. And that's King of the Hill. Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Joy. That's how they acted. And so what Judaism, what Abraham introduced to the world, is a different perspective on life, on reality. There's a designer, there's a design, there's a plan, and we all have responsibility. We're all responsible to see this plan through and to not mess it up, to make it better, to be partners with God in creation, to be in probably the most daring idea ever. This is the most radical idea, to be co-creators, co-designers with God. God says, I want you to be a designer along with me. Make it nice, make it beautiful. I want you to believe in the vision. Not just do the vision because I told you to. I want you to believe in the vision, right? Believe in the vision and be a co-designer, co-creator. That's okay. So then go grab it. So and that's what God wants. Oh, you're back? Okay, awesome. Hold on, Reva, say hi. There you go. All right. Good. So this is the difference between a world that is filled with the notion of design versus a designless world. So the first thing we know about God, right? The first thing we know about God in Torah, the first description that we know about God is God as creator. God as the creator of heaven and earth. And we also know that before God created, there was an intention, there was a plan. So the first thing we know about God is creator, but God is also designer. And God is also architect. So let's talk about design and architecture, because it's not just another thing that some people do. It's something that God does, and it's a divine experience. Designing something is absolutely touching on one of the most beautiful and powerful descriptions of God that we know. God as designer and architect. So let's talk about design. Human beings are naturally drawn toward beautiful design. We love things that look nice. Human beings are naturally drawn toward design, toward symmetry. There have been many studies that show that people find, when we talk about attractiveness, people find symmetry attractive. Right? We're looking at, there's a building, David, behind you. There you go. I'm seeing symmetry there. I see two. Anyway, the point is like this, that architecture, but really any design, it's all about creating something with a vision, but there's also a beauty to it. And beauty is a real important part of the process. Beauty lies oftentimes in symmetry. But I'm here to discuss also another element to it as well. I remember reading an article recently that said that although human beings are naturally drawn to symmetry and consider symmetry to be beautiful, nonetheless, the human eye is also drawn. Yes, and you can join them. People are also drawn toward asymmetry. In other words, when you have something that is by and large symmetrical, so it logically fits a pattern in the mind, you can see it, you can appreciate it, you value it, etc. When you also then have a feature or an element that is unusual, unexpected, something that veers off from the norm, it actually catches the eye and draws the attention. And in its own way, it can actually be pleasing to the eye, and we can consider it to be beautiful, or at least unique and engaging, when it has something that is, quote, out of place. But of course, the out of place is intentional. So it's not out of place at all, it's by design. So again, let's talk about a few types of design. I'm giving you two categories of design. One design is design where everything is perfectly in place and perfectly symmetrical. That's one design. And then you have another design where things are perfectly symmetrical until you have that one thing that is a little bit different that then wakes up the person that's looking at it, or the person that's viewing it, seeing it, etc. It grabs their attention. Wait, that almost shouldn't be there. But it's there, now I'm engaged. It's a good technique to get the eye to pay attention, not be lulled into the smoothness of symmetry. This is why you'll find design have unusual features. Architecture, there's a feature that stands out, something that you're not expecting. The truth is, design is not only when it comes to buildings, but design is everywhere. When we talk about musical composition, there's also design. And musical composition is a lot of it is about symmetry. It's about certain notes and certain scales kind of repeating and leading one to the other. But then you have certain musical compositions that take you by surprise, where you think it's going one direction, and out of nowhere, it makes a sharp turn. And that creates another form of beauty, the beauty of asymmetry. So there's beauty of symmetry and beauty of asymmetry, and both are found rooted in God's design. What do I mean by that? So I've been saying up until now how Judaism believes Abraham introduced to the world and Abraham's descendants, and those who follow the Abrahamic belief system believe that there is a designer to the world, right? That God is in control. God designed the world purposefully, and there's symmetry. But at the same time, there's also some asymmetry as well. And this is what I was alluding to before when I referred to us and our role as co-designers and co-creators. You see, God didn't create a perfectly finished world. God created some gaps, some empty spaces, some lines that don't exactly meet up where they should meet up. And you look at the world and you say, wait a second, something seems a little bit off. Don't blame the designer. Number one, it got your attention. Number two, that means that you have to create, you have to finish it up. If you see a gap, you see a space, you see an opportunity, you see something that's missing, something that's off, that's exactly your role in life. Your role in this master grand design is to finish it up. So when it comes to design, here's what we know. Design is divine. God is the first designer. Design is divine. God designs, we also are meant to design. The world has a purpose. Beauty is in symmetry. But there's also beauty in asymmetry. God creates a symmetrical world with elements of asymmetry as well. That's where we're meant to come in. Design is not only when it comes to a building, design is everywhere. Everything around us is filled with design. Not just the structures, but everything. A book is written by design. A musical composition is composed by design, right? A film is written and filmed and produced by design. Art is created by design. Everything around us is by design. I need to mention the famous story that's attributed to various sages, including the Rambam, Maimonides. It says that Rambam, the story goes that Rambam, or fill in the other great Jewish philosopher, that the story could be told with, was in a running debate with a fellow intellectual who happened to be someone who didn't believe in God, this other person. They respected each other greatly. They were both writers and philosophers and thinkers and loved the conversations, but they disagreed. They sparred also over this idea, the notion of God or not. Well, it so happened that Maimonides was visiting this fellow's study, where he had he was a writer and a poet, and a lot of his writings were there on his desk. And the fellow steps out. And Maimonides is looking on this fellow's desk, and he sees that there's a poem that the other guy started that he didn't finish. Maimonides takes the inkwell and the quill, he dips the quill in the inkwell, and he pens a conclusion to the poem. Beautiful and brilliant conclusion to the poem. After a little while, the fellow returns to his study, and then Maimonides took the inkwell and spilled it in the corner of the paper, or whatever, the parchment, whatever the writing material was. And the fellow comes back in the room, and he soon after discovers this ending to his poem that he was struggling with for a while. So he reads it, he sees it, he reads it, and his face lights up, a big smile on his face, and he runs over to Maimonides and says, "This is unbelievable. It's amazing. It's fantastic. It's fabulous. I love it. Thank you for finishing the poem. I've been stuck on this for a while. It's a masterpiece." Maimonides says, "I don't know what you're talking about." He says, "Wait a minute. You finished the poem. Thank you for finishing writing it." He says, I didn't write it. He says, of course you did. I could see it's fresh writing. He says, no. What happened was, by accident, my elbow, my hand knocked over the inkwell, and it spilled, and it formed those letters. The guy says, are you crazy? Are you meshuggah? You've gone mad? What are you talking about? But you knocked over the ink, you knocked over the bottle of ink, and it spilled on the paper, and it formed exactly those letters, in exactly that order, and exactly that structure to finish up this. You think I'm a fool? Are you playing a game? What is this? Maimonides gives a big smile and he says, and you expect me to believe that the world is an accident? Yeah, the world that has much more symmetry, much more precision, much more beauty. You're telling me that the world, the whole entire, this whole machine, it's all a random inkwell spilling that happened to produce everything that's so beautiful and so complicated and so magnificent. Come on. You think I'm playing around with you? You're playing around with me. How could it not be by design? Anyway, that's just a story about the notion of design. So here's what Judaism teaches. Number one, the world is created by design. Number two, God is the designer. Number three, God creates this world by design with symmetry. Things make sense. Number, whatever we're up to, the next point is, God also creates the world with asymmetry. Things don't make sense. A lot of things in this world don't make sense. The last point is, our job is to make sense of what we can, to surrender, to accept that which we can't make sense of, but to work with the rest. Okay, so that's a little bit about design. But here's really where I want us to focus today on. The fact that design is all around us. Everything in life ultimately stems from this notion of design, and as human beings we are curious when we see design to learn more about the design, and sometimes, very often, more about the designer. There's one place where we stop looking. It's like, oh, we don't want to hear, not we, present company excluded. People don't want to hear about design of the world. Like, what design? What design? No. Because, honestly, it's because, if we're being honest, it's because embracing a designer of the world comes with accountability. And that's, who wants that? Again, present company excluded. People are afraid. People are shying away. Who wants accountability? Right? It's easier to say it's an accident. Therefore, I'm accountable to no one. Therefore, let's party. As opposed to, like in that mansion, or like in that house. As opposed to, right? As opposed to the notion of, there is a design, there is a designer, there's a purpose, and I'm here to fulfill a purpose. That creates a responsibility and an accountability. And that's something, if you're looking for, freedom, that's not exactly that. Although there is tremendous freedom working with the design, there's more freedom. I'll tell you a story about that. There was once there was a British publisher. I forgot his name. Had a very colorful name. He was an English fellow who was in publishing, and he published the most sarcastic, satirical, cynical papers. He was like a satirical publisher. And later in his life, he became a religious person. He became somebody who became a religious person. And he was asked, what brought you to religion? What brought you to God? So he responded the following. He said that I was once on my yacht, and I asked the captain of my ship, the captain of my yacht, what's the secret to sailing? What's the secret? If you had to sum up sailing, right? Sailing a ship, sailing a boat, a yacht, whatever. If you had to sum up sailing in one line, what would it be? So the fellow said, when it comes to sailing, if you want to enjoy the freedom of the high seas, you have to be a slave to the compass. If you want to enjoy the freedom of the high seas, you have to be a slave to the compass. And that made a very big impression on him. And that, to him, was a message about God. In other words, if you want to enjoy freedom, the beauty of life, be a slave to the compass. Understand the order, understand the structure. If you want to play music, if you want to compose music, it helps to know how musical notes work. It helps to know how music works, right? If you want to know how to sail, you have to know how the seas work. If you want to write, you have to know some methods of composition. If you want to create art, it helps to know some structures of art. So when it comes to this life that we're living right now, right? When it comes to this life that we're living, understanding the design, understanding the designer doesn't take away from our freedoms, but it actually allows us to truly live free and really enjoy and make the most out of this life, as opposed to the alternative, which is to not be sure of anything, to not be sure there's any purpose, anything. So why am I even here? How enjoyable is that, to not even know why you're here and where you're going and what the purpose is, and if you should be going anywhere anyway? That's not freeing at all. That's very stifling. It's very suffocating. So in the final analysis, knowing there's a designer, knowing there's a design, even if we'll never understand fully all the contours of the design, is profoundly impactful. Which brings me to the big idea that I want to share right now. And that is, I want you to take a moment, wherever you are, it doesn't matter, wherever you are, I would bet that you're going to see the following. Wherever you are, maybe, hopefully, you'll see the following. I want you to find, okay, before this, in almost every, I'm not an architect. I feel like I should cite that disclaimer because maybe you were thinking that I was. So I'm not an expert in the design in structural design. I'm not. But here's what I think I know. I can't say I know this for a fact, but here's what I think I know. What I think I know is that in all forms, or at least in most forms of architectural design, there is a common feature, or there's a common feature item that exists in every type of structure. Please unmute yourself if you can somehow channel into the way my brain is thinking right now and tell me what I'm thinking. What is a common feature?
Foundation.
Good. What else? Excellent. Good. What else?
An entryway.
Good. What else? Excellent. Good. What else is common to pretty much all structures?
4 walls.
Good. Walls. That's what I was looking. Thank you, Tony. That's what I was looking for. I was looking for walls. Why am I looking for walls? Because I'm about to share an insight into walls. But it's amazing how, structures around the world, throughout time, it's almost like the definition of a structure is that it has to have a wall, or at least some walls, right? Even a sukkah, right? A sukkah on the holiday of Sukkot, that portable structure that takes us way too long to build, right? At least me, way too long to build, right? The kind that I have is like, it's literally lumber, and every year there's me just building it again pretty much from scratch. Anyway, back to the point. So, hold on, what was my point? Yes, walls. So whichever society, civilization, nationality, whatever, a structure is going to have walls. Even a temporary structure like a sukkah, the definition of a sukkah, which is the portable huts, right? In Jewish tradition, the portable huts that we sit in during the holiday of Sukkot, which falls out usually in the fall, September, October time, right when it's getting a little bit too cold to be outside in the sukkah, too long and a little bit rainy. Anyway, so even a sukkah, the definition of a kosher sukkah is it has to have walls. If there are no walls, then you don't have a sukkah. We call that being outside. But that's not being in a hut. That's just being outside if there are no walls. A sukkah requires 4 walls, or at least 2.5. At least 2.5. With a roof that's porous, it has to allow the rain to come in. It's a non-temporary roof, but the walls have to be solid enough that the wind won't blow it around. It won't mess it up. It'll be solid enough. Which tells us the importance of having those walls. So the definition of a structure in Jewish law is that it has to have walls. That's what a structure is. So every structure, pretty much, I'm trying to imagine a structure that doesn't have walls. Even a tent, a teepee, I don't know, they all have walls, right? Can we imagine a structure that doesn't have walls? Then wherein lies its structure? Again, could be, I'm not an expert, could be there's a structure that doesn't have walls. I have trouble imagining what that looks like, but that's not, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But by and large, structures have walls. Oh, a chuppah, excellent. Excellent. The marriage canopy doesn't have walls. Excellent. You know why? Such a beautiful thing. Such a beautiful thing. And by the way, it's so interesting that you mentioned that, Fran. I did a wedding a few years ago. I officiated a wedding in Vegas. This was a very interesting wedding. We did a wedding in a hotel, or at a hotel, a casino hotel. What happens at Vegas weddings stays with. No, I'm kidding. So, but yeah, I shared this insight under that chuppah in your hometown. I actually shared this idea that what is the mess? Why does a chuppah canopy, wedding canopy, not have walls? Because it's meant to be representative and symbolic of an unstructured structure. In other words, of a home in which there are no walls, barriers, partitions, separations between husband and wife, between the parents and children, where the love, where understanding flows freely without blockages. So in fact, it's a home structure without the walls that ordinarily get in the way. But we hope that the couple, right, when they build their home, actually they do have walls, because otherwise it would be a little bit, I'm saying physically, but not emotionally and spiritually and conceptually. There should be always open communication, open flowing of energy between all the parties, but not have that thing. Anyway, I was considering when I did that wedding to kind of do an Elvis impersonation. What I settled on was the last line that I said under the chuppah to the groom was, now you may break the glass. You know, the custom is the groom at a Jewish wedding breaks a glass wrapped, of course, in a napkin or something, a heavy cloth, breaks the glass, and that's it. So I said, now, so-and-so, you may break the glass, just don't step on my blue suede shoes. And that was how the chuppah ended. That was my tribute. That's a true story. Anyway, so getting back to, that was an Elvis reference. So getting back to the walls. If you have walls around you, and I imagine, I'm looking at some of you, and I can see walls, right? If you have walls around you, I want you to focus on this detail. I want you to focus on the corner. This is a very overlooked place. Look at the corner where 2 walls converge. Now, it could be an inside corner. If you're inside a home, you could look at the corner like from the inside. If you're outside, you could look at the corner of a building from the outside, right? So you could either be looking outside or inside, but either way, I want you to look at the corner. Now, yeah, a sukkah and a chuppah, like a home, have support. Yes, excellent, yes. So, if we look at a corner, right? Look at a corner, what do you see? You're probably going to say, I don't know, a corner. But what is unique about a corner? This is the Kabbalah right now. We're about to discuss the Kabbalah of Corners. So what's a corner? What is a corner? It's a place where 2 walls merge, where 2 become one, kind of like under a chuppah, right, where two people become one in marriage. This is where two walls become one. Actually, chuppah is going to work out very nicely for this whole discussion. It's where two become one. Two walls are becoming one. So what's the secret? What's the secret to the corner? How does a corner make two into one? Because you move away from the corner, there's one wall. It's a wall. And then I see the other wall. I'll just, behind me, can you see? There's a corner there somewhere. It's hard to see. There's a little bit of shadowing right there. I don't know if that's going to work. Yeah? You can see that's at a corner over there. It's black wall, so it's hard to see right now. Whatever. Oh, maybe there you go. In the ceiling you can see. Right? Ceiling you can see the corner a little bit. So there's a corner back there. What's the magic of a corner? What's magical about a corner is it's the space where two become one. Where one wall and another wall now become perfectly integrated. And at the exact precise point of the corner, you actually can't differentiate between one wall and the other. It's not, okay, let me give the directions here. This would be the north wall. This direction is north, and this direction is east. Behind me is east. Okay, so this corner right here would be the northeastern corner. So at the precise space of the corner, it's not north, it's not east, it's not the north wall, it's not the east wall. It's almost a new entity. It's a new reality. It's the corner. So what's the power of the corner? I want to share with you a Hasidic insight into corners. A mystical insight into corners. Kabbalistic insight into corners. How can a corner bring together two different walls? How does that happen? How does a corner have the power to bring together two different walls? The answer is very simple. It's when the north wall, what is a corner? It's when the north wall stops being a north wall. And it's when the east wall stops being an east wall. It's when it loses its identity that it can come together as a corner. As long as it's defined as I'm a north wall, then that's all it is. As long as this wall is defined as an east wall, that's all it is. But the moment that these walls have the courage to say, we're putting words in walls' mouths. I know what we're doing right here. Don't worry. I'm very well aware. The moment the walls have the courage to say, I am no longer a north wall, not a nor wall, that's something else, narwhal. I'm no longer a north wall, or I'm no longer an east wall, right? I cease to be defined as a north wall. I cease to be defined as an east wall. Then, at that moment, there can be convergence, and we call that a new reality called a corner. That's not a north wall, it's not an east wall, it's just a corner. So what's the power of convergence? What allows two to come together as one? Very simple formula. It's discarding, it's letting go of the definitions that keep you tethered down into yourself. As long as you hold on to the definition that keeps you tethered to self, then that's all you are. As long as you're fiercely holding on to your protective definition of self, whatever that is, no matter how lofty that is, as long as you're holding on to that definition of self and selfhood, then that's all you have. That's all you have. You're limited to that definition. However big it is, however small it is, it's still a limitation. When you have the courage, when you have the guts to let go of self-definition, to let go of the ego, then you can have convergence with the other. Then you can find a space to meet, and that space we call the corner. So, what does the corner teach us? It teaches us that the only way to truly converge, to truly become one, is when when we're willing to discard, to let go of our own definitions. And when we instead embrace the element of surrender, of totally melding and melting into the other. This is really what's meant to happen at a chuppah, right? When two parties become one. It's each party, in essence, letting go of their self-definition to become connected with the other. Now, it doesn't mean you lose your personality, you lose your interest, you lose your hobbies, you lose your ideas. No, you still have that. But what it means is, in the important areas, you have the ability to accept and surrender and connect with the other. Because as long as we're fiercely holding onto our wall, so then we're never really going to connect. We're never really going to connect. It's going to be like two ships sailing in the night. Two ships never really connecting. The point of connection, the corner, is created at the point when this wall says, I'm no longer this wall, and that wall says, I'm no longer that wall. It's in that space of letting go that the two converge. And this becomes a truth in life. How is it that you and I can connect with somebody else? It's in that space when we have the courage to let go a little bit, let go, surrender. It's in that space of surrender that we can finally connect with somebody else, with another human being. Throughout the last, we started studying this right after Simchat Torah. Of 10 months. I've been studying this for 10 months. And in my opinion, this text, that we're studying, is a gift. There's no other way to state it other than it's a gift. It's a gift to humanity, it's a gift to me, and hopefully it's a gift to you as well. It's an absolute gift. And, I can't see that, friend. Oh, you got the book. Nice. The reissued version. Awesome. Yeah. Oh, nice. All right, cool. It's an absolute gift. And from the beginning, there's been one theme, of course, with a lot of related concepts and mystical elaborations and mystical exploration. But the consistent theme has been all friction, all fighting between people starts with ego, and all connection between people starts with surrender, what we call in Hebrew bittul, letting go. As long as we have ego, as long as we're holding on to self, we're never going to truly fully connect with the other person. There's always going to be a point of contention. There's always going to be a fight. Either an active fight or a fight waiting to happen. If we're holding on to ego, if that's what's most important by us, it's a recipe for disaster, or for at least tension and disconnection. When do we converge? When do we connect? When do we finally experience the corner life? Right? It's when we're willing and ready and able to let go of ego, to embrace the other. And this is the secret to how Chachma and Bina can get along. Chachma and Bina are what we've been talking about the last several weeks. Chachma and Bina are the two primary, if you will, the first two intellectual powers or capabilities that we have. Chachma being the ability that we have. Chachma is really about surrender. Chachma is us surrendering to an idea that's beyond us, not understanding it, not figuring it out, not explaining it, but just surrendering to an idea. Bina is us understanding the idea and us owning the idea, so it's the idea on our terms. Chachma is exploring an idea on its terms. Bina is taking an idea and assimilating it into us so that we understand it how we are. So Chachma and Bina. But how do they work together inside the human mind? How do we go from Chachma to Bina? How do you and I take an idea that starts off as abstract, undefined, infinitely open-ended, right? It could go any sort of direction. How do we then take that in our mind and contain it, break it down, understand it, and process it? How do we work with both opposites of the Chachma expansion and the Bina? How do these two powers work together? The surrender of Chachma and the analysis of Bina. And really, the answer is that they work together when each party, Chachma and Bina, are willing to let go a little bit of their own definition, so that they can work hand in hand with each other, in tandem with each other. This is the subject of the 25th chapter of our text, chapter 25, which talks about the space of convergence between Chachma and Bina, and how in Chachma there's a little bit of Bina, and in Bina there's a little bit of Chachma. But you know what really creates the convergence? It's that corner space where each one is daring to let go of its own identity and just be. And just be. Chachma certainly knows how to let go, but even Bina knows how to let go, and that's why Bina can exist within Chachma, and that's why Chachma can exist in Bina as well. So what I want to do now is let's pause for a moment, and one second. I'm not sure. Maybe it's upstairs. You can check. So let me pause for a moment and take any questions or comments or discussion points on this topic, and while I open up the PDF. So feel free to jump in, please. You don't have to. Only if you'd like to share something or have a question about one of the things that I mentioned today so far.
So what is the prime purpose of the cover of the hookah, the cloth on top?
Excellent question. Excellent question. It's kind of like the kippah, like the head covering that reminds us that there's something that's above us. There's the third element here that's above us, the two individuals. You see, what is it that really helps two different individuals to let go, to embrace the lessons of the corner, to really let go of their own definition? It's helpful when the two parties embrace something greater than self. It's the exercise of surrendering to something greater than self that can help a person surrender to the other as well. Surrender, in a sense, begets surrender. Surrender trains surrender. So if a human being, okay, give me 1 second here. I just want to open up this. Okay, here we go. Okay, a human being that has the ability. Give a simple example. Let's talk about food. Right? If a human being can mindfully, intentionally say, I want to eat this, but I'm not going to. Right? I'm going to surrender my plate to God, so to speak. Right? I'm going to change my eating pattern, or based on what God wants me to eat. Even though I want to eat this, that, or the other, I don't want to eat this, that, or the other. I'm ready to let go. I'm ready to let go of, that looks good, that looks tasty. Doesn't matter. I'm going to surrender. I'm going to let go of that and eat the kosher thing. If a human being has the ability to do that, that's like a training ground. That's like a testing ground. If a human being has the ability to do that, then a human being has the ability to, in a relationship with somebody else, to say also the same idea, to let go, to not have to always be right, not have to win, not have to dig one's heels in, but the ability to let go. It's a powerful idea. It's a powerful idea, to the point that you could say, I'm not saying that we should say this or should not. I'm just musing kind of together with you, together with all of us, saying that one could look at the entirety of Torah and mitzvot, or all of mitzvot, as this incredible training ground to learn the ability of self-control and surrender, right? Which is very beneficial in life on many different levels. Yes. Kabbalah and parenting. I don't know if this is called parenting. Typing in a password. But nonetheless. So here's the deal. I've cited before the Marshmallow Experiment. The one in, I think it was in Stanford. Second. There you go. Okay, so ask the brother to help you. Okay, so we mentioned before the Stanford study of the Marshmallow Experiment, where the kids were given a marshmallow and told, if you eat the marshmallow now, good. If you wait a certain amount of time, then we'll give you a second one, a second marshmallow. So instant gratification versus delayed gratification. Which one will it be? Will you go for the one hold on, did I freeze? Am I back?
Yep, you're back.
Thank God. Good. So look, the Marshmallow Experiment. Instant gratification versus delayed gratification and a payoff at the end. Which one will it be? They ran studies. They tested these kids and they followed the kids. Look, I'm not making a judgment. I'm just saying what my understanding of the results were. That children are the people that had more self-control, that were more likely to hold off on the marshmallow and did better in school, did better at work, etc. because of the self-control. It wasn't about the marshmallow, it was about the power of self-control. The muscle of self-control is beneficial. The muscle of surrender is beneficial. So you want to look at a mitzvah and say, I don't understand why, but I know that if I do this, it means that I'm practicing self-control and surrender. If that's your motivation behind it, sure, why not? If your motivation behind the mitzvah is, look, tefillin in the morning, why should I wrap a leather box on my arm and head? Yeah, why should I do that? Why should I pray 3 times a day? Why should I eat kosher? Why? I don't understand why, but God wants it. So even though I don't want it, I'm going to practice some self-control and surrender, and that's it. Even if that's the only reason behind it. You know what? It makes us better human beings also. It helps us. It exercises the muscle of self-control and surrender, which are very beneficial qualities in a human being on every level. So, let's jump into chapter 25. I'm going to share my screen with you. And we are going to study this together inside. It's a short chapter, especially compared to some of the chapters we've been studying recently. It's fairly slim, but it packs a powerful punch. Okay, we start off with some Hebrew phraseology. Don't worry, I'm going to walk you through everything. We're going to do this together. Chapter XXV, chapter 25. Here we go. I love the Roman numerals. It just gives it just elevates the whole experience. Hold on, Fran and Sandrine, in the new edition, does it have the Roman numerals or numbers? It's hard for me to still.
It's the same page too.
The same layout. Oh wow, they didn't change it. Okay, oof, I should contact them. Okay, because there's some stuff that I've noticed. Okay, nice. Okay, let's jump in. Chapter 25. We can now understand the meaning of. This is a Hebrew phrase. Check this out. The phrase says, Havein b'chachma, which literally means understand through wisdom. But Havein is like Bina. Havein b'chachma means Bina in chachma. They're different energies. What does that mean? Havein b'chachma, you should Bina in chachma. You should experience Bina in chachma. What does that mean? And conversely, the other phrase, chacham bebina, become wise through understanding, or more, in our terminology, it means chacham bebina means have chachma, experience chachma in your bina. What does that mean? Right? What does this phrase mean? Kabbalah asks, what does this phrase mean? We have 2 different powers of the mind. You have the power to expand and imagine and create and touch an idea that's beyond you. That's chachma. Then you have the power to analyze under a microscope and break things down and understand it and make it work. That's bina. And explain it. What does it mean, havein b'chachma and chacham b'bina? To mix the 2. How do you mix the 2? Have bina and chachma and bina. Each one has its own box. Each one exists in its own space. So here we go. I'm glad you asked. How do they cross over? How do they meet at a corner? Right? It's today's class, architecture. Havein b'chachma refers to the inclusion of bina within chachma. What does that look like? That enabling chachma to develop a concept to the level of comprehension and understanding. Even though the essential nature of chachma is bittul and non-expansion, hence it's only a point like the yud, nevertheless it can be expanded, understood through bina. Let me explain. I'm going to stop sharing and explain so I can see you all. Basically, chapter 25 of our text is chapter 24. We separated the two. Chachma is in this box, siloed. Bina is in that box, different energies. We said they had different sources. We spoke on a constellation level. Notzer, Vinake, we gave mystical. We traced it back to the mystical origins. This one has this source, that one has that source. Mars and Venus, right? Remember that book? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Chachma is from here, Bina is from there. Different planets altogether. Chapter 25 says they still work together. And you know why they work together? Because each one has a little bit of the other inside of it. As impossible as it sounds, Havein b'chachma. There's the power, a little bit of Bina in chachma. And chacham b'bina. There's a little bit of chachma in Bina. There's a little bit of Bina in chachma and a little bit of chachma in Bina. It sounds impossible. They're so different. And yet, the inclusion is so strong, it's so powerful, that there's a little trace of the other in it. This is the inclusiveness that the powers, that the mystical powers, the energies of the universe, and our soul powers possess. This inclusion of the opposite inside it. Chachma and Bina are not just different. We said over the last few weeks we've been explaining how they're actually opposites. They're exact, diametrically opposed from the other. Chachma is letting go of the way I understand it and looking at objectively the idea and getting lost in the idea. And Bina is me standing strong and understanding the idea and breaking it down into details. Right? So this is saying that even when we're dealing with opposites, it's possible for each one to include a piece of the other in it. And as I explained to you before, when does that happen? When each one has the guts, when each one has the courage to let go a little bit of its self-definition. Because as long as it's holding on to its self-definition, Chachma would say, I'm Chachma, you're Bina, you're on the out. You're not Chachma, you're Bina, you don't belong here. And Bina would say to Chachma, you're Chachma, you're not Bina, you don't belong here. How do you have Havein b'Chachma? How do you have Bina in Chachma? And how do you have Chachma in Bina? It's only when each party is willing to say, I'm making space for you. And in that space, and how is there space? Because I, whatever I am, that definition of I is absent in that space. In that little corner, I, self-defined I, don't exist. Therefore, I give you space to exist. As long as I'm filling all the space, you can't fill it. The moment I step back and create space, that's where you can fill. The corner is where both parties allow the other to exist. And they both can exist, and they coexist. And that's the beauty of a corner. In all architectural design, there are corners. Maybe you'll talk about a round wall, a circle, and then I have nothing to say. No, but then there's no beginning and end either. Then there's no definition. It's all one. You don't have an east or a north wall. You just have, there's oneness. That's oneness without any friction whatsoever. Right? That's oneness with no friction. That's why under a chuppah, speaking of which, we give a wedding ring. Right? And the wedding ring is not meant in Jewish tradition. We don't put etchings. There are no words etched on the actual wedding ring. Other rings you can put, engravings. But on a wedding ring, it's perfectly smooth. To connote the idea of a seamless relationship. Seamless. No edges, no friction whatsoever. Now, I know this the imagery, right? There's a round ring under a square chuppah. I get it. Maybe Judaism likes shapes, whatever. But each one has its meaning. Even when you feel like a U, create a corner. Ideally, there are no walls even, right? Just the round, seamless circle. Infinity. No beginning and no end. No edges at all. But if you're edgy, I don't mean like that way. If you do feel the edges, still create a corner for the other. Still create a space, even in the corner, where you don't take up that space, so that the other person could fill that space, and vice versa. But getting back to Chachma and Bina, that's how you have Havein b'Chachma and Chacham b'Bina. How do you have Bina and Chachma and Bina? It's when each one is willing to let go a little bit. As Adam points out in the comments, the shattering of the vessels happened in the world of Tohu, the world of chaos. We live in the world of Tikkun. Everything we're discussing now are the energies in the world of Tikkun, the world of repair. In the world of chaos, Tohu Vavo, that chaos and void. What happened in the world of chaos? Shattering of the vessels. This is one of the biggest ideas in Kabbalah. The shattering of the vessels. What happened with the shattering of the vessels? Well, as we've discussed many times, they were intolerant of each other. The energies could not tolerate each other. Chachma was Chachma, and Bina was Bina. Chachma says, no, don't understand it. Lose yourself in it. And Bina said, lose yourself. What is this? I don't know what Barb it would say. I can't think of a good one. But what is that? That's ridiculous. That's the best I can find. I can come up with it right now. Bina is where it's at, and each one could not tolerate the other. So what happened? The whole thing exploded. It didn't last. It couldn't survive. When you have forces that don't create space for each other, each one takes up the whole room, and you put a bunch of them in the room, and each one takes up the whole room, that's a recipe for disaster. Imagine you put two people under the same roof. A couple, two people under the same roof, and no one gives in an inch. Imagine that scenario. No one gives in. No compromises. No conversations that end with reconciliation. Nothing. How long is that going to last? It's a powder keg. It's explosive. It's called Shvirat HaKelim, the shattering of the vessels. The second chapter of our discourse. We're chapter 25. Chapter 2. Last fall we studied this BC. I like that, BC. Yeah? We said that what drove the shattering of the vessels? Midjan. Fighting. Intolerance. No space for the other. That's why they shattered. That's why they shattered. So how do you have Havein b'Chachma Chacham b'Bina? In other words, the crossover. How do you have that? Tolerance. Giving space. It's a dirty word today. Giving space? What I should back down? What I should compromise? What I should surrender? How dare you suggest that? Right? No! This is how I feel. All right. That's what you have then. If no one compromises, if everyone's taking up all the space, then that's it. That's what you got. You want that? You want that world? You want to be in a relationship where no one gives in, where no one understands the other, where there's no space? You want to live in a home without corners? I don't even know what that looks like. Only walls? No corners? Again, I'm trying to picture that architecturally, what that looks like. But you and I live in homes that have corners. If you're wondering Shalom Bayit, right? Peace in the home, just look at your Bayit, just look at your home. Look at the corner. And that's the secret. The secret to peace, the secret to good relationships is the Kabbalah of the corner. It's the Kabbalah of architecture. It's how I started this class. Right? It's the corner. Are you able in this time, in this moment, in this space, are you able to not be the north wall? What do you mean? I am the north wall. We get it. And we'll even give you a certificate that says you are the north wall. Fine, good. Let it be known. Fine. But right now, can you be a little less north wall? Okay, good. And you, east wall, can you be a little less east wall? Can you give a little space? Perfect. When we each give space, then we can connect. And when we connect, it's beautiful. And you know what? In that point of connection, you forget about why it was important for you to be that north wall in the first place, or that east wall in the first place, because you're connected, and that's beautiful, and that's magical, and that's enjoyable. And you realize that the joy of digging your heels in was not actually a joy. It was just ego. It was just ego asserting itself. And that's no fun. I mean, it felt very important. We felt very indignant at the thought of having to let go, but it's not important. Sorry, but it's not enjoyable. Does what I'm saying make sense? Yes. Let's get back to Chachma and Bina. This is our safe space. Chachma and Bina is our very safe space, because we're talking about energies and ideas and thinking, and it's a really great way to discuss like really personal stuff in Chachma and Bina. Right? Let's talk about them. We need two characters. We need like mascots, like Chachma and Bina. Reminds me of the story of Mazel and Seichel. I got to tell this. Okay, so there's two characters. One's name is Mazel, and one is Seichel. I'm going to translate. Mazel means luck. Mazel was always very lucky. This guy, the luckiest guy in the room. This guy, Mazel, called him Mazel. His name was Mazel. Such a lucky guy. And then there was Seichel. Seichel means logical. This guy was very, very logical. Very, thought out, methodical. Thought out, nothing left up to chance. Very, okay. Turns out they were friends. Opposites attract, whatever. They were buddies. One day they go walking together. They're on a hike. They're walking. They end up in the city. They're walking in the city somewhere. And Mazel turns to Seichel and says, "You know what? I'm feeling a little tired. I want to rest for a little bit." So he walks into the middle of the street, or they're walking down the street. In the middle of the street, he lies down. Mazel lies down. Seichel, the logic, says to Mazel, "Are you crazy? You meshuggah? You're lying down in the middle of the street? It's dangerous. Cars are going to come by. That's reckless. Who lies down in the middle of the street? Come to the side." Like off the sidewalk or whatever, into the bushes, or whatever, into the field. Come to the side and lie down. He said, "No, you know what? I'm tired. I don't even want to walk another inch. I'm tired. This is it." Seichel says, "You're crazy. It's meshuggah." And he goes off to the side. Well, a little while later, a truck comes rumbling down the street. Yeah, speeding. Lo and behold, the driver sees somebody lying down on the street. Gewalt! Quickly veers off to the side. Seichel. Done. What's the moral of the story? Seichel is wonderful to have, but you have to also have a little bit of mazel. That's the upshot of the story, right? It's good to be logical, but you have to have some good luck also in life. It's an anecdote, a joke. I'm sure it's got its own parable and message for another time. But talk about opposites attracting, and ways to connect, and mascots, and Chachma and Bina. But anyway, let's get back to our safe space. So, Chachma and Bina have the ability to converge and work together to the point that there's this inclusiveness with amongst the two. So let's jump back inside. We're going to do just a little bit more inside. We have a few more minutes. According to my clock or watch, doesn't matter what yours says right now. Don't worry, we still have a few more minutes. I only mean that in jest and in love. Okay, so take a look. Wherein lies the connection? Okay, so wherein lies the Bina in Chachma? Where do you see Bina in Chachma? The premise is they work together. They're able to let go and work together. Tikkun. Work together. And not explode and blow each other up. How does that happen? Where does that happen? It happens here, he says, I'm going to highlight this. Even though the nature of Chachma is bittul and non-expansion, nevertheless, it can be expanded and understood through Bina. In other words, the idea that you lost yourself in Chachma, eventually you settle on a core point of Chachma, and that point can now be developed into Bina. In other words, Chachma itself brings an idea to the point that it can almost hand it off to Bina. That part of Chachma that hands it off to Bina, that's the part of Chachma that allows space for Bina. Let's talk about the other way. Where do we find Chachma within Bina? Next paragraph. Chacham beBina refers to the inclusion of Chachma within Bina. Where do we see that? Here we go. Even though the nature of Bina is amplification, let me explain what that is. Amplification means when you take a core idea and you break it down into all the points, you understand how it applies here and there and there and there. So you took one idea and it's now expanded. It's now involving back inside, right where I'm moving the hand thing, involving a multitude of details and explanations. That's Bina. It nevertheless possesses still the power of Chachma, which transforms Yesh into Ayin, which transforms a big something into a small nothing. Here we go. And this is how it's manifest. The result of the entire process of logic and understanding is gathered into its single conclusive point of summarization, Nekudas Hatamtzis. Let me explain exactly what this means, and I'm going to stop sharing. When you understand something, you've developed an entire essay on it, you've developed a book, you've developed a seminar, a workshop, a series, a year-long program to explain this idea, or to expand on this idea. A whole thing expanding. Somebody asks you the simple question, what's it all about? If you can summarize it in one line, guess what? You've moved from Bina back to Chachma. Bina has the ability, after all is said and done, to summarize itself and to give you the point of it all. I don't want to get too meta, but I try to do this in these classes. I start off, in preparing for these classes, I start off with the point, the Chachma, the point. Like, what's the idea? What's the core idea? And then I try to develop it. And development takes a lot of time, and a lot of different examples, a lot of different stories, a lot of different anecdotes, a lot of different ideas, right? To break it out. Hopefully at the end, it all comes back to the one point, to the core idea. That's the goal. So in this process of point, expansion, and point, we have the convergence of Chachma and Bina. I don't only mean about this specifically. I gave the example. Now let's move back into the concepts. Chachma and Bina. Chachma is the point. It's undefined. It's unrealized yet. You haven't broken it down. You haven't analyzed it. You haven't applied it yet. It's still almost the theoretical point. Perfect. But guess what? Chachma, when you really understand, but not really understand yet because you haven't understood it yet, but when you have a grasp, at least on some level, of that point, it's now ready to be delivered over into the hands of Bina to analyze. So Chachma has a little bit of Bina inside. That's what we call Havein b'Chachma. Understand in your Chachma. In your Chachma already, there's a little expansion or preparation for expansion. And conversely, Chacham b'Bina means that in your Bina, you have the ability to summarize it at the end. You have the ability to summarize it at the end. This is magnificently seen in the shapes of the letters, in the forms of the letters. But before we get to that, maybe we'll do that next week, but let's finish this paragraph. Take a look. This entails, I'm going to highlight where we're up to, right there. This entails, what's this? Summarizing, after all the Bina, after all the expansion, all the analysis. Imagine like you do an analysis on a company, and then you give your summary. What's the bottom line? A good investment, not a good investment. Bottom line, invest or not. That's the Nekuda, that's the point. That's the Chachma that comes after the Bina. Or that's the Bina, that's the power of Chachma in Bina. Even in Bina, which is expansion, You can also give a summary. This entails the negation. This summary entails the negation of all the individual details and explanations, and culminates in grasping in a grasping of the essential intellectual matter. If you can't summarize it, it means you didn't understand it. It means your being is lacking. Are you with me on this magical point that he just says? If you can't, not you specifically, but if a person cannot summarize after all of the details are broken out, if you can't tell me, therefore what's the point? That means you got lost in the details. It means you don't really understand the details. Because if you really understood the details, you could then bring it back to the core point. That's what he says. It culminates, all of the details, it culminates in the grasping of the essential intellectual matter. It all boils down to the point. The essence of the concept becomes a single point, which became understood. The essence of the concept becomes a single point, which became understood through the many details and explanations. Yeah. Notice, you had a single point that was then broken down into many details and explanations. But if you really understand it, you can understand how it comes back to that single point again, or on a deeper level. Whereas the point of Chachma, he explains it here. Whereas the point of Chachma represents the concept before it's analyzed, the point of it before it's analyzed, the point within Bina is the result of the analytical process. This matter is discussed in other places. So I think we might leave it here, because next week we can talk about the architecture of the letters, Yud and Hey. Hold on, let me see something. Yes, it's too much to try to run through right now. Okay, we'll deal with it next week. Okay, so back here. What's the idea here? What he's saying is that each party has a little bit of the other inside of it. Chachma has a little bit of Bina, a little bit of expansion. And Bina has a little bit of Chachma, a little bit of contraction within it. So Chachma can hand it over to Bina to be developed. And after all the development of Bina, a person hopefully, if we understood all the details correctly, a person hopefully has a grasp of what's the point, what's the bottom line. And that bottom line is, once again, the power of Chachma and Bina. So, in the final analysis, you have two opposite entities. Two opposite entities that converge once, that converge twice. It converges again and again. And how does it happen? It happens because they tolerate each other. Because they create space for each other. Because Chachma says, I'm going to give a corner to Bina. And Bina says, I'm going to give a corner to Chachma. And that's how our minds work. If our minds were absolutists, if our Chachma was pure Chachma, and our Bina was pure Bina, then our ideas of Chachma would never be lent to Bina, and our Bina expansions would never have a conclusion, which is Chachma. We could never expand an idea. Chachma would hold on to it. Chachma's ego would say, how dare you even suggest to take away my pure abstract idea and try to break it down. I will not let you do that. Find your own idea to come up with Bina. Right? Chachma would say, I don't give you the idea. And Bina would say, I don't let there be a point. I don't let there be a summary. I don't let there be a conclusion. It all has to be all of the details, all of the time. And if that's how the mind worked, it would be a profoundly chaotic place. It's already complicated. Our minds are already kind of complicated. Imagine if they would be fighting. Imagine if Chachma and Bina would be fighting within our own minds. It'd be a disaster. You and I are the beneficiaries of our own systems working in concert with each other. I'm not even talking about biologically, although I kind of was thinking about that as I said that. We have complex systems. They're all working together. They work together. Working together means that each one allows space for the other. So why don't we do the same for the other person? Why is that good enough to make us work, but not good enough to make... Why is that process good enough or valuable enough to make each of us individually work, but somehow we're afraid, or we become so territorial that we don't try that and trust that process to allow all of us to work together? We become territorial. We become me versus you instead of us. We say, no, you don't see it my way? That's it. You're out. You don't like what I like? You're done. We have nothing to talk about. You don't look the way I look. You don't act the way I act. I have no time for you. I have no place for you. Why do we become so absolute? I'm a north wall. You're an east wall. No connection. It's time for us. It's overdue. It's really overdue time for us to learn the lessons of architecture, to learn the lessons of design, to learn the lessons from the designer of the world, to learn the lessons of God, who created a system where energies work with each other, where the mind, Chachma and Bina, work with each other. And the way that happens is by each one stepping back, stepping down a little bit. And it doesn't hurt us. It only enhances us. It only takes away from what we thought we were. But it allows us to discover something much greater. And even if that definition of something greater is just that we are now a human being that can tolerate someone else, that is worthy of the description something greater, in my opinion. Even if it's like, so what do I get? So I made space for the other. So what do I get? That's what you got. You are now a person that made space for someone else. And isn't that valuable? Isn't that alone more precious than gold? That itself is worth the price of admission, isn't it? Right? You need something else on top of that, right? I was a north wall and then I gave it up. So what do I have now? That's it. You have that gift, the gift of being able to give up, the gift of creating space. You're now a corner. It's a beautiful thing. You're now connected with somebody else. The world is more divisive than ever, but that doesn't mean that you and I have to be. Doesn't matter what other people are doing, right? Like your mother told you when you were a kid. It doesn't matter what Johnny's mother says or allows, right? It doesn't matter. It's all about you and me and us right here in this room. Will we give space to the other person? It's so easy to say, yeah, but they don't give space for this, that, the other. I should. Don't worry about that stuff. Don't allow the ego to get in the way. Allow the soul, allow the neshama to ring true. Your soul knows how to work together. Your neshama is doing it all the time. These powers, Chachma Bin, are powers of your soul. They're spiritual powers. It's not brain tissue. These are, it works within the stuff, but these are spiritual powers. You already have the answer. You, me, we already have the answer. We're already giving space within ourselves. So let's just expand the space to the other. But even that person, how? If it's not the other, then what kind of space is it? Allow space for yourself is not much space, right? If you allow space for someone who thinks and acts and looks exactly like you are, that's not really giving space. That's still hoarding the space. That's still holding on to your space, to your comfort zone. When I'm talking about giving up space, it means you're a north wall and they're an east wall. You know the tradition of north walls and east walls? They don't get together. Theoretically, right? It's our job in 2020, in August of 2020, to end this, to stop this for us, to open up space for the other person. Doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. It's about us. And when we do so, we touch on our purpose in life, which is, first and foremost, to get along and to finish the walls and to build the corners of God's house. God designed this world. This is by design. Design is divine, and God is the first architect. And God created it a little bit unfinished. He put people in there facing different directions, and then says to us, make the corners. So here's the question. This week, will you make a corner? Will you make the corner to heal a little part of this world, to be able to get along with someone else in a way that's unconditional, in a way that creates that space? It's a question I'm not asking you only, I'm asking myself. Can we together this week make more space for the other? All right, thank you for joining me today for Kabbalah and Coffee as we explored architecture, design, corners, Chachma Bina. See, this is my after all the Bina. This is my summary. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm just bringing you in on it, right? This is my Chachma. This is creating space within my Bina for my Chachma. So, yeah, So today we explored the Kabbalah of architecture, design, corners, buildings, space. And the bottom line is, let's all create space. The world will be better off. Let's create that space. Let's bring that love to the other, unconditionally. All right, thank you for joining me today for Kabbalah and Coffee. Next week, listen to this, next week, we're going to learn about how in the letters, remember, if you remember, the first two letters of God's name, the Yud and the Hey, in Kabbalah, mirror Chachma and Bina. So Chachma is the Yud, Bina is the Hey. Next week, listen to this, we're going to look at the architecture, the design of the Yud and the Hey, and find that last time we looked at them, we did this once before. We looked at Yud and Hey and understood why Yud is Chachma and Hey is Bina. This time, we're going to look again at the Yud and the Hey and discover how inside the Yud, there's a little bit of a Hey, because they're crossover, right? And inside the Hey, there's a little Yud. That's next week, to find out how each one gives space for the other. Because otherwise we have different letters, absolute. It's all about the crossover now. It's all about giving the space. So we'll look at the Yud and the Hey to discover the convergence of the two. That's next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. I look forward to it. Again, I want to mention, if you love Kabbalah, and if you like the letters, if you like numbers, if you like numerology, if you like secrets and secret codes, and who doesn't? If you like a good mystery.
¿Te gusta el diseño y la numerología?
It said,
I was talking in Spanish and thanking you for this.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
My pleasure. Thank you for the thank you.
What a great class. I'm a designer. I'm so surprised with all this, and thank you very much. Now I'm looking for in a different way.
Okay, good.
My job.
Perfect. Now I have to create corners. Now, okay, but metaphorical corners, places the bridges to connect.
Beautiful.
So, like I was saying, if you want to learn more on this, consider joining us tomorrow night for the numerology course. You can find it on Facebook, on our website. Check it out. If you want to try the first one and you're not sure, with pleasure, just let me know and we'll get you connected. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., 3 Mondays, 3 sessions on numerology. It's 3 sessions, but really, who's counting? That was a joke. All right, we'll see you all. Thank you all for the kind words, and thank you all for sharing your time with me this morning. Let's be empowered to make a difference. Thank you all. Shavua Tov. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.